Good morning, everyone. I am Bryson. I'm the CEO of Consulate Health Care. I want to thank AHCA and Provider Magazine for your continued support and partnership of our industry. We really appreciate it. Thank you to Medline and Matrix Care for giving us the opportunity. I have to admit, this is it's a little nerve-wracking. It's easy to stand up in front of 500 of my employees at the company because they can't really say anything bad about me, at least to my face. But as I look out here, there's so many people that I've known for so many years, it was kind to say only 20, that I've admired and respected, and so it's a little intimidating. My hope today is that I know most everything I'm going to say, you all are actually doing or have done, but hopefully there's at least one nugget or takeaway that you'll find helpful, and it won't be a waste of your time. So I want to start out by just telling you a little bit about me. And I knew it when Dr. German started out. I should have led with the Roman orgy slide. But instead, you got this. And so, like many of you, I have grown up in this industry. This is pretty much all that I know. But I'm a pharmacist by trade. That's how I got in. Now, if there is that one nugget that you take away, it should be this. If things don't work out for me, and one day you happen to find yourself walking into a pharmacy to have your prescription filled, and you see me behind the counter, you should promptly turn around and leave rapidly. Because I haven't practiced pharmacy in well over 20 years. Those of you that stayed at Holiday Inn Express, I'm sure last night have more knowledge about pharmacy than I do. But nevertheless, this is how I started. I was a consultant pharmacist. I was the guy that UEDs put in the broom closet with a rack full of charts and prayed didn't come out until I left. But I loved it. I loved the interaction with the people and with the patients. And I never left once I got in. I did a little bit in home health. I did a little bit in hospice. I got my minister's license, and I was the CEO of another company for 10 plus years. And then I did get out, and I went to the dark side. I went over to private equity on the real estate side, and I learned that collecting a rent check is a hell of a lot easier than actually paying the rent. But it was boring. I'm sorry to all you PE folks, it was boring. And I missed the patient interaction. And that's where Consulate came in. And that's really kind of where our story begins. And I think it's important that I tell you a little bit about what Consulate was like when I arrived, and then a little bit about the approach we took to transforming the company and some of the risks that went along with that, and then we can get to the results. But in a couple years before I arrived, Consulate and another company called Levy were put together. And instantly overnight, the company doubled in size. And it didn't go from 2 to 4, it went from 100 to 200. And along with that came a lot of challenges, a lot of changes. There were 208 buildings across 21 states. There were 2 separate operating platforms. We had AHT and we had PCC. We had 2 separate sets of policies and procedures. We actually kind of had 2 management teams. And about that time, the whole industry kind of took a slide. And the infrastructure of Consulate was crumbling. And we had reputation issues, we had regulatory issues, we had financial issues. And it didn't take me long after arriving to realize the company was broken. Somebody whispered in my ear, it was a sinking ship. But the company was broken, the structure and the process were broken, but the people were not broken. And it quickly became apparent to me that we needed to rebuild the company on the foundation of those people. Now, we were also having those regulatory problems that I mentioned and the quality problems, and knowing where the future of our industry was going. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, look, we have to rebuild the company on the foundation of people and quality. Now, therein lies the first risk, because we had an ownership group that wanted to see change. And in their mind, change was financial change, right? How do you save a company? Well, you go in and you cut, and you turn around numbers. And the risk was, when I sat down with them, it was, look, we can rebuild this company, but it's going to take patience, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, and it's going to take 2 years because we have to fundamentally change the organization, and we have to rebuild it on the foundations of people and quality. So once we got over that, then it was time to hit the field. And that's what I did. I spent weeks on the road with nothing but a pen, paper, and an ear. Met with 170 of our executive directors, administrators, face to face, and just listened. And boy, did they have a lot to say. And some of them, were personal struggles. We can't, Mr. Bryson, we can't recruit and retain staff. We haven't had a raise in 3 years. We haven't given raises to our people in 3 years. We have no real insurance plan, except for a high deductible plan. We don't give any paid holidays. And they were struggling. I'll tell you, right after I got there, I was visiting one of our buildings in Fort Myers, Florida. It was a 3-story building. I do like many of you did. I was touring it. I started at the top floor. And this was about 11:30 at night. And so it was third shift, CNAs. And I get down to the second floor, and pretty soon I start seeing the same CNAs I saw on floor 3, on floor 2. And then I started seeing first floor CNAs on the second floor. And after I got over the shock of who the hell's caring for the patients, I realized they had backed me into a corner, and their question was, and this was like November, Mr. Bryson, why can't we get paid for working Christmas? Now, I guess I hadn't had that part of my CEO orientation yet, where they told me we didn't pay holidays, because I didn't know. And you want to talk about an awful feeling. And I realized that the lifeblood of our company, the people taking care of our patients, are really, truly struggling. And so I'll come back to that in a second. But they had multiple issues with their staff. They had no education and training programs. We had no orientation programs. So the ones that we were actually able to get in, we didn't keep. They were gone. We had an 80+% turnover. We had over 60 buildings using contract labor and agency. And I could talk for an hour on that cancer, but we won't talk about contract labor and agency. But we had 60+ buildings in it. And then they switched to the company. And they said, we have so many reports and so many forms. And I will give them credit for that. I mean, we have a form to tell you how to fill out a form. We have meetings to tell you how to run your meetings, But they had so many rules and policies. They had so many bosses. They were on conference calls. The ED felt like a figurehead that had no time or no authority to actually run their building. So out of this, and this was a common theme throughout the whole course of the road trip, out of this, I decided to make 3 promises to myself, to our owners, to the management team, and to all the employees. And the first promise was, guys, we got to re-earn the trust of these 15,000 people. And the only way to re-earn trust is to listen and do. Act. Do something. Now, here was the second really big risk, right? Because we were struggling financially. But I knew we had to make an investment in our people. So we immediately gave raises, and we've given them every year. We fired our broker. We brought in a new broker. We did a whole new insurance program. I went back down to that building in Fort Myers and announced that we were paying holidays. And we redid our comp plan. And I needed to demonstrate that we heard them and that we did something. Now, all that was at a cost. But the second promise we made was, we're going to improve the reputation of this company. I knew they were struggling. Some of them were downright embarrassed. I knew because I got phone calls. Many of you called me and said, what the hell are you doing? Do you know what you're doing? So, and I wear my big boy pants every day, so I could handle that. But I knew they were struggling with the fact that they were embarrassed. And we made a promise to them that until you don't want to take off your name badge when you leave work to go into the grocery store or the bank or the post office, until you don't want to take off that name badge, our work won't be done. And then the third thing we had to do, we promised to make their lives easier. You know, you remember those conference calls that I talked about? So I had this guy that was a Six Sigma black belt. He was like amazing, loved him. And we engaged him to do a little study. Our administrators were on 72 hours of conference calls a month. 72 hours. Because our structure was broken. And so I knew we had to change the structure. And what do I mean by that? Well, we had to get rid of the silos. See, everyone had a boss. Our DON actually didn't work for the ED, they worked for this corporate DON, and so did the MDS person, and the admissions person reported to a corporate admissions person, and the ED really didn't have any autonomy or authority in the building. And our corporate people became doers. They were just running around fixing everything and never being proactive about how to improve quality going forward. And so if I said it once, I said it a million times, I said, you know, we're going to mirror a high-functioning healthcare center. Every single one of you in the corporate office at one point in your life sat in a seat in a building. You might have been an ED, you might have been a DON, you might have been an admissions coordinator, you might have been an MDS coordinator, you might have been a business office manager, but every one of you sat there. And just because you got promoted doesn't mean you lost what it was like to actually run a facility. We know what makes a successful facility. Good ED, good DON, strong department heads, interdisciplinary team play, getting together every morning, rounding through the building. So we're gonna mirror that on up through the organization. So we changed around the structure entirely. Now, this was a big change. It was a big change for the facility and it was risk, because all of a sudden we were asking our administrators and EDs to make decisions. They should be making the decisions. They're the ones closest to the market, closest to the business. But it was also a change for our corporate office. You know, and I used to say, guys, just because you're sitting in your office, sitting on your keyboard, pounding out emails, expecting a response from the building within 15 minutes, I don't want them to respond in 15 minutes. They're not supposed to be in an office. They're supposed to be on the floor. They're supposed to be dealing with patients and families and employees and surveyors. And so we rolled out what we called the Trusted Consultant. And it was a fantastic program because we had to change our behavior in what I call the beast. That part about making their lives easier. You know, we had to stop with the conference calls. We had to stop with you feed the beast, you feed the reports up. We had all the information, so we made an investment in a technology platform, a business intelligence platform, so that they didn't have to send reports. We had the data, but it was just a change in the mindset. And then we needed a new operating philosophy. We needed something tangible. We needed people to see something different. And, you know, the prior regime was a sort of a top-down, lead with a heavy fist, Papa knows best mentality. And they were used to focusing on nothing but metrics and financial metrics. You know, census and expense PPDs and labor PPDs. Now, I'm not saying we don't focus on that. There's some of my folks out there right now that are saying, oh, hell yes, we do. We talk about census. I know we do. But people first. The first foundation was people. And if we didn't get the people right, we weren't going to have quality. And if we didn't have people and quality, we were never going to have financial viability, no matter how much we cut. And so We needed it ingrained in everything we did, our QAPI meetings, our performance review meetings. Every meeting needed to start with people and quality. And it became the mantra of, if you're having a meeting and you're not talking about people or quality, you shouldn't be having a meeting. And so we formed this new philosophy. Now, I know I said we convinced our ownership group to be patient. But if you fast forward a little bit, I have to admit, I became a little impatient. I didn't tell anybody. I had a lot of sleepless nights. Are we doing the right thing? Are we really going to make it? And then along came Hurricane Irma. And I know it sounds weird, but for the first time, I realized we were doing the right things. For the first time, I had affirmation that the people focus was working. You know, sometimes a crisis brings a family together. And 6 days before the storm arrived, I had a call from our COO. And he said, we're preparing. I've got an interdisciplinary team together. We've created a command center in our Maitland office. It's going to be staffed 24 hours a day. We've got a pre-storm, we got a during storm, we got a post-storm. There's two things that he really said was, I want to be there for our people. Day or night, round the clock. If they need something or if they just need to talk to somebody because they're scared, they're going to have a voice to talk to. Then we went and started going on the pre-storm. We staged fuel trucks, we staged buses, we staged supplies. Our vendors stepped up. Everything was being prepared. Then we had evacuations. And we evacuated over 1,200 patients without one injury. All of our sister buildings were prepared to receive them, and then we got them back home after the storm. Again, 1,200 patients without one injury. I saw CNAs and nurses get on buses not knowing what was going on with their house, not knowing if they still had one, get on a bus, not knowing when they were coming back, no questions asked because of their love for the patients that they were caring for. What I witnessed was nothing short of amazing. Selfish, selfless acts of kindness and compassion. I knew at that time, I still get a little emotional about it. I knew at that time we had the people part on the right track. Our volunteers were amazing. Now, media, present company excluded, provider. The mainstream media, I could talk on this for hours, don't get me started, chose not to cover any of these things. Nothing but negative. And we did have a negative, not consulate, but there was a negative outcome. But no coverage on the multitude of heroes that we witnessed across the state. And so we took matters in our own hands and we did our own Consulate Gives Thanks video. Because our competitors came out, our partners in industry, our vendors, the local emergency management offices, all the way up to the governor's office. People needed to be recognized for the truly heroic efforts that went through during that storm. Now, somebody jokingly wrote, Hurricane Command Center now closed after the storm. And I thought it was cute. But it actually meant a lot more than that. Because it's a reminder, and why we keep it is because it's a reminder to us that we're going to face many hurricanes. We did the next year with Hurricane Michael. We're going to face many challenges, many storms. It could be, new conditions of participation. It could be changes in the 5-star program. It could be a new reimbursement system called PDPM. Regardless of what it is, if we take the same compassionate, servant leadership, proactive approach that we employed for this hurricane to whatever storm that we weather in the future, that's what we want to do. And there was one statement that never left me, that I heard over and over on every call and every meeting, was that regardless We will put the patient and the employee at the center of every decision. Now, I didn't come up with that. I wish I would have, because I love it. No matter what challenge or what storm we face, regardless, we're going to put the patient and the employee at the center of every decision. So, a couple of minutes that I have left, did it work? Well, it's still a work in progress. But those 60 buildings that were in contract agency are now 10. Not agency free, that's where we want to be, but 10's better than 60. That 80% plus turnover cut by over 50% or 42%. Not there, I know, many of you are much better, but we're on the right trajectory. That portfolio that we took and started with was a 1.98, less than a 2-star average. 26% increase in our overall 5-star, while the health survey portion of the 5-star was held constant, was frozen, right? So truly remarkable improvement in the quality scores. 47% increase in our quality metric scores, the actual people, the objective part of it, right? Over 80% of our Florida buildings are now a 4 or 5. Our total company QM score is over a 4. And then we still needed to address the reputation issue. So we took on a big initiative around Joint Commission. And last year, we successfully accredited 76 of our skilled nursing facilities with the Gold Seal of accreditation from Joint Commission. 76 in 1 year out of 76. So couldn't be happier with that. And then I know there's some bean counters and finance folks out there that are questioning, but what about the financial piece? Well, that's still a work in progress too. But yes, and it took a little longer than I wanted. But last year we made a $50 million change in our cash position. We increased our EBITDA margin by 170 basis points. And we now have a company that is financially viable and can continue to invest in our people and our quality. So, do I think you can save a company on the foundation of people and quality? Yes, I do. I think you can improve a company. I think you can turn around a company. I think with an investment in people, a purpose-driven mission led by servant leaders, and a little bit of hope and patience, certainly you can. So, thank you all very much.